Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Rosie and I am a UK midwife. If you are interested in the kind of things that I've been putting out on my channel, please click on that subscribe button because the videos I've got coming out over the next few weeks are gonna be perfect for you. This week's video is something that has been really heavily requested. So this week's video is all about how to become a UK midwife. I remember from my own experience the process is a little daunting and it feels like there is a lot to take in. So I wanted to tell you about my experience and the things that I learnt throughout the process to hopefully help you guys on your journey to becoming a midwife. I do apologise if the lighting in this video isn't great. Honestly, if you could see the other side of this camera, we move house in 2 weeks and this room is our box room. This is the only space that doesn't have a box in. I have got a box that is squishing against my right knee. I've got another box that's squishing against my left ankle. This is the only tiny space that I could fit a tripod and myself. So I do apologise if the lighting's a bit off. It's the best I can make out of the situation. So, how do you go about becoming a midwife? So essentially, to become a midwife in the UK, you need to do a midwifery degree. These places on these courses are really hotly contested. Obviously, because it is a degree, there is a certain amount of academic requirement. So GCSEs, A-levels, things like that. Midwifery is a degree that has a much higher percentage of people going into it at a later stage in their life. Lots of people have kids and then decide that they want to become a midwife. So unlike a lot of other degrees where you tend to be 18, obviously there are students who are 18, but there's also a wider proportion of different age groups becoming midwives. If your A-levels are 10 years ago, that's fine. The only thing that you do need to have is academic study in the last 5 years. And this is something that is stipulated in the majority of universities' requirements, but you would have to check with the individual university as to what the stipulations are. When I first started looking into becoming a midwife, I was 25. I'd done another degree and had done a few years in another career. I'm actually going to do another video about my changing career and the reasons and things behind that, because I do get quite a few questions about that. For me, when I started thinking about applying, I knew I had to get in the first year of applying, or my most recent study would actually be 6 years ago when I would have had to do an access course or something like that. So lots of people do access courses or do additional GCSEs or A-levels or something so that they can boost up their application, and it would also count as recent academic study. For me, I had a degree level course in the last 5 years, but if I hadn't got in that first year, then I would have had to do additional study. Making the decision to become a midwife, I actually was out for dinner with my oldest friend, who is also my maid of honour, and we were talking about me wanting to change careers and come out of performing, and she just gave me the confidence to go ahead and do it. And I went home that night, I had a conversation with my parents, and I started my UCAS application the next day. So I suppose that's the next thing to talk about. Applications for university in the UK go through an online application system called UCAS. On UCAS, you fill out all of your information, your academic achievements, where you went to school, all of those bits of information about yourself, and effectively it's an online CV. And you fill it all out and put your personal statement in, and then that application as a whole gets sent off to whichever universities you decide to apply to. It can be quite frustrating at times, but I promise you will get there. So when it comes to UCAS, I thought what would be most useful is actually talking you through the timeline and how quickly you can expect these things to happen, because I had no idea of the process involved and how long these things would take. So I've actually gone through all my emails and written it all down so I can go through a proper timeline with you. I first logged into UCAS on the 4th of December 2015. That's quite late. The UCAS for next year has already opened, so don't leave it until December before you first even create a login. If you are looking to apply for next year, I would start that process now. It's a long form that you've got to fill out, lots of information that you've got to put in. You've got to put a lot of time into writing your personal statement, and I am going to do a video on that. But yeah, I would get started on that process. Don't leave it until December. I actually missed the UCAS deadline, but I called the universities and they were quite happy to still accept my applications. So one of the key parts of your application is your reference, and you give UCAS the contact details for the person who's going to give your reference, and UCAS requests that reference from them. So they requested the reference on the 17th of January, which is when I submitted the reference details, and they received that reference back on the 21st of January, which is quite a quick turnaround. Do not expect your reference to necessarily be that quick. It might take a little bit longer, so give them a chance. As soon as that reference came back, I got a notification from UCAS, and at that point the rest of my application was ready to go. So I actually sent my full application, including the choices of the universities that I wanted to apply to, on the 21st of January. Because I had already lived in London, I'd lived in Glasgow, I'd lived in Bristol, I didn't really mind where I went university-wise. So I basically applied places that I'd quite like to live, rather than needing to apply somewhere specific because that's where I have my husband and children or things like that. I had a lot of freedom when it came to choosing the universities. So I ended up applying to University of West Scotland, University of the West of England, so that's Bristol based, Brighton, Anglia Ruskin, and the University of West London. Initially, the University of West London application was for a February start date. So yeah, so I sent off that application on the 21st of January, and a couple of weeks later, on the 3rd of February, I got an email from UCAS saying I had an interview, and that was from the University of West London for that February start. And I remember this being a really big thing because it was my first midwifery interview, but I also had a concert the night before because I was still doing some singing work. So I had a concert the night before in Scotland, and I then flew down to London and got a taxi from the airport to the University of West London for that interview, and did that interview. So then on the 15th of February, so still less than a month since my application went out, I also got offered an interview for Brighton. And on the 18th of February, I had my interview for Brighton. So still less than a month from my full application being sent off to UCAS, I had done 2 interviews. On the 22nd of February, I got a rejection from the University of West London, and actually I wasn't surprised that I got rejected because I really wasn't very prepared. I think very, very quick turnaround. The fact that it had been less than a couple of weeks since I'd filled out my application, I wasn't prepared for that interview, so I'm not surprised that I didn't get in. I then changed that university spot on my UCAS, still for the University of West London, but instead applying for the September start. 10th of March, I got notified that I was on the reserve list for Brighton University. On the 18th of March, I got offered another interview for University of West London, this time for a September start date, and that interview was going to be on the 5th of May. However, also on the 18th of March, I got the offer for my Anglia Ruskin interview through, and on the 5th of April, I interviewed at Anglia Ruskin, and 6 days later, I got my offer for Anglia Ruskin. I just loved it there. I knew, having already been to Brighton and to University of West London, I knew that my favourite was Anglia Ruskin. So I sat on it for a couple of weeks, and then I made the decision to accept my Anglia Ruskin offer, and I withdrew my application for everywhere else. Because I didn't have any results or anything pending. I knew that I was going to meet the requirements of my offer, so I didn't need a reserve choice. When it comes to the actual interviews, of the interviews that I did, each of them was slightly different, but the components that they all had that were the same, they all included some kind of tour around the university just to kind of give you a bit of a grasp of where you would be studying for the next 3 years. They all talked you through what to expect on the interview day. They all had a literacy test, they all had a numeracy test, and they all had an interview element. Only one of the interviews that I did had a proper panel interview where I sat one side of the table and the panel sat the other side of the table and they asked me questions. The others had the multiple mini interviews, and I think they are becoming much more common. and I think they can get more out of you. I think you can show more of what you're capable of in that setting, and I think that's why they do it. You go from table to table, there's a different lecturer or person from the university at that table, and they will ask you a question, and it'll all be on different topics. And I just think that means that if you've messed one up, you can still achieve really well on the others and show what you're capable of in the others, and I think that brings out the best in people. One of the universities also gave us an article beforehand to read up on so that we would be able to talk about it in our interviews. Obviously, every university does their interviews in a slightly different way, but the general idea was the same. And I think the fact that you get to go along and do a tour really gives you an idea of the feel of the university, and for me that helped me make my decision when it came down to accepting an offer. Having been to the university and had a tour on my interview day, I knew that that was where I wanted to go, and it made my decision really easy. So that's it. That is an overview of my journey and how to become a midwife in the UK. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and please give this video a like and subscribe. As I said at the beginning, I've got lots of videos planned to come out over the next few weeks. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications so that you don't miss any of these videos. I really hope this video has helped and answered some of your questions, and I will see you for another video next Thursday.